Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another very special edition of Once Upon a Turnbuckle. And this is one of those episodes with one of those guests, which I think makes this very, very easy for me, because what we're going to talk about, what this guy has done, speaks for itself, and it will take us down all kinds of nooks and crannies. And this is someone who pulls on my love for wrestling, my love for writing. It's all going to encompass in this one. So I welcome to the show wrestling historian, film producer, author, amongst other things, Evan Ginzburg. Welcome to Once Upon a Turnbuckle, sir.
Great to be on, Chris. Thanks so much.
Oh no, thank you so much for coming on. It's these weird little twists of fate I love when since I've been doing this, the people that you meet and I say the weirdest kind of places, social media brings you in contact with so many people. And it's so good when I find someone like yourself who not only is available and wanting to come on to talk about their work, but the work you've done, I'm already familiar with it, which is
Oh,
even
thank you.
better.
Thank you.
So obviously it's a wrestling show. So we're going to go down that angle. And I think one of the easiest places to start, probably for yourself, like I do with most of my guests, is wind it right back to your relationship with wrestling, firstly. Let's set the scene. Is when did wrestling first come into your life?
I
Early
was,
memories, anything like that?
yeah, I was sitting home on a rainy, nasty Sunday, and I was bored, and I was a kid, and back then there was no video games, no social media, no
Hmm.
internet, no nothing, and I discovered the mysterious UHF dial, and I start fiddling. It had a big U on it,
Yeah.
and we just never really used it because it was like these secondary channels, and I'm going through them, and a lot of it's foreign language channels, and then there's PBS, public broadcasting type
Yeah.
stuff, which for a 12-year-old you wouldn't be particularly enamored with. And then all of a sudden, I'm watching this big, monstrous guy pounding on this Indian, and I'm like, what is this? And I didn't realize it was Chief Jay Strongbow. This was around 1972.
Yeah.
And it was WWF wrestling on the UHF dial, these little tiny channels. And I'm a mark. I'm a kid. I don't, and all of a sudden, Strongbow's doing this herky jerky comeback war dance, and he's chopping this big guy down. And my eyes are popping out of my head. I'm like, this is Marvel superheroes and supervillains,
Absolutely.
and I watched the rest of the show and I had the same reaction to the other matches because again, you think it's all real, quote unquote
Mm.
real.
Yeah.
And I made a mental note, when is this on? What channel? And I started watching religiously. And from there I discovered the LA TV show that was in New York from the Olympic Auditorium. And there's John Tolos and the Hollywood Blondes and Gordman and Goliath. And
Wow.
it was amazing. And then there's Florida wrestling in New York with Gordon Soley announcing that probably the greatest announcer of all time.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
you had the Funks and the Briscoes and Eddie Graham and Mike Graham. And I was just obsessed with it. And again, every punch and kick, you felt it because you thought it was real.
Yeah.
And I started begging my dad, please take me to wrestling, take me to wrestling. And at Madison Square Garden at the time, we're New Yorkers, you could tell by
Mm.
my accent.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah.
So at the time, you couldn't go until you were 14 because
Okay.
Dick the Bruiser started a riot back in the day, and
Okay.
they wouldn't allow kids in there.
That's
So
hilarious.
I'm 14 years old, and the main event. First of all, I walk into the garden with my dad, and I'm a kid,
Yeah.
teenager, and the first reaction was, "Wow, it's in color." It's in
Oh, of
color
course.
because we had a black and white
Oh, of
TV. This
course.
is
Yeah.
not long
Then.
ago.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, there's Nikolai Volkoff and Fred Blassie against Bruno and Jay Strongbow, the Valiant brothers
Mm.
against Dean Ho and Tony Gurria. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was, again, it was like superheroes and supervillains to a kid. And it was like when it was over, you could breathe again. That's
Yeah,
how
right.
exciting it was. Yeah.
And it's I mean, you've thrown some names out there. I mean, I'm a real old school wrestling fan. The stuff I grew up with, we're talking mid to late 80s, 90s. That's my era. I mean, we're talking real golden era here that you grew up with,
Oh, yeah.
and getting to go to Madison Square Garden as well, from someone over in the UK who didn't have wrestling on their doorstep. I mean, that sounds like a kid's wrestling dream right there.
It was considered the Mecca of pro wrestling,
Mm,
although as I evolved as a fan, I realized a Dory Funk or a Jack Briscoe or a Bockwinkel could probably wrestle circles around the Bruno or a Pedro
yeah.
Morales or
Mm,
whatnot. But it was a super heavyweight territory. It
mm,
was built on, you had Bruno, Pedro Morales, and Bob Backlund. The exception, of course, was Billy Graham, who had a 10-month run as a heel. But you would
mm,
have these faces, and these monstrous super heavyweight heels would come in to face them. And
mm,
because otherwise they wouldn't be credible, because Bruno could legitimately lift like 500 pounds and he was a Superman. So you had to have these monstrous guys facing him. And
mm,
again, as a skinny kid, you know, they were larger than life. And we would
yeah.
stand outside Madison Square Garden and get autographs and meet all of them. And it was just
Insane.
amazing as a kid to like shake Bruno's hand and you didn't want to wash it afterwards. Or Billy Graham would be super nice, even though he was the heel.
Right.
Yeah, it smartens you up. I'm like, wow, the Grand Wizard's nice, and Albano's nice, and George the Animal Steel is nice, and Andre the Giant and Dusty Rhodes won't sign any autographs for us. What's going on
What's
here?
up there?
Yeah, and you're
That's
starting to get a little smartened up
yeah.
kid even. Yeah, yeah.
That's it. I mean, it's insane to know that that was your start. I mean, in those, I'm very jealous that that was what was around then. I'm kind of think about the difference now of what kids who are discovering wrestling now are exposed to compared to that. I mean, when you saw guys like that, there weren't, I don't think anyway, these really elaborate storylines knitting the matches together, start to finish. And
What would happen would be the face would turn heel, and it was a really, really big deal back then.
mm,
Um, Probably before your time. Spiros Arion turned on Bruno, and they were legit tag team partners off and on.
yeah,
And that was a big deal. And Larry Zbyszko, of course, turning on his mentor, Bruno, was
yeah,
huge,
yeah,
huge. They had that at Shea Stadium, 35, 40,000 people.
right,
And etc. So on. The heel turns were really major, and
yeah,
in reverse. Snooker came in as a heel and he turned face, etc.
mm,
So on. That was a big deal. They didn't have these, 2-year storylines
no,
like the Bloodline, or it was
no,
very simple back then.
yeah.
And what would happen is the face would turn heel, and then he would grow a mustache, and this made him the bad guy all of a sudden. Peter Maivia all of a sudden had a mustache after he clocked, Jay Strongbow with his ukulele or
Right.
whatever. You know?
Something distinctive, or start wearing a hat or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, from your fandom, then, when you discovered it as a fan, let's move along to when you started getting involved in it yourself in any kind of way. Did you at that age think, I want to be part of this world in some respect, or did it just kind of come bit switching door, like sliding doors moment at some
Um,
point, or?
what happened is one thing always led to another. I loved it so much, I started reviewing some of the shows I went to for the early sheets, which were less, dirt sheets and more
Mm,
like fans who were passionate. We'd send each other clippings and
mm,
reviews, and it wasn't as exposing the business
mm,
as much back in the day, although there was some of it. But
mm,
um, and people would send results from different parts of the country, and you would go, wait a second. Fred
Mm.
Blassie's a bad guy in New York, but they love him in California. What's going on here? So inevitably, you're going to smarten up with this stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
But I'll tell you how I actually got smartened up before.
yeah.
I hate to cut off the question
No,
mid-sentence,
don't,
but
no, don't do
but um, the big kids would say to us, April 30th, 1977, Billy Graham's going to win the title from Bruno in Baltimore. And I don't know how it filtered down to them, but that's exactly what happened.
Wow, okay. Lucky
And
guess, maybe? No, couldn't have been.
no, I think what happened is just the buzz got out, from the people in
Yeah,
the know and it
sure.
filtered down. But so I started reviewing cards and then I started doing my own sheet, Wrestling Then and Now. And from there, um, Fred Geobold, who hosted an art show on a 50,000 watt New York City radio station, WBAI FM, very political station, but his was an arts program. Um, he invited me to do a wrestling segment. And I'm like, wow, 50,000 watts, New York, sure. And we started interviewing all these legends, and I'd be sitting in this, major station, and I have Lou Thez and Bruno and Ivan Koloff and Eddie Guerrero and Sherry Martel, not all in studio, some, but a lot on the telephone. And
Yeah.
it was really magic. And so one day Johnny Valiant's actually in studio and he's like, "Why don't you be my agent?" And I'm like, "I've
Okay.
never been an agent." So he's like, "You're an intelligent guy. You could do it." And he was like so convincing. I'm like, "All right, I'll give it a try." And next thing I know, I'm booking him for autograph appearances and indie cards
Wow,
and personal appearances. We'd go to people's homes and businesses, and
that's amazing.
so like I said, everything leads to something. It
Yeah,
opens different doors. So I had Johnny Valiant and Nikolai Volkoff doing an autograph signing as the agent.
right.
All of a sudden, Scott Franklin, the executive producer, the money guy on The Wrestler, his buddy comes in, his best buddy, and he says, quote, "You guys would be perfect for this film that Darren Aronofsky's working on. Do you know Darren?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm a cinephile. I'm a movie buff.
Mm,
Requiem for a Dream, Pie. Yeah, I know Darren Aronofsky.
yeah,
He was a New Yorker. We loved him in New York. So
yeah.
so they said, let's exchange numbers. We're going to get back to you. And about 6 months went by and nothing happened. And I almost forgot about it. All of a sudden, I get a phone call. And next thing I know, I'm at a meeting with Scott Franklin, Darren, the screenwriter, Rob Siegel, a couple of other guys on their team. I brought Nikolai, Johnny Valiant, Nikolai's shoot manager, Nikita Brezhnikov, who used to
Yeah,
book him, like I
yeah.
did for Johnny, and Tiger Khan, who wrestled for the Hearts up in Calgary. He was a very close friend. And we're sitting there for hours just knocking down beers and laughing. Because Johnny was a stand-up comedian and he was like the funniest guy
Oh,
you'd
of
ever
course.
meet.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And Nikolai was so warm and friendly, and he was telling road stories. And by the time it was over, it didn't even feel like a business meeting. It felt like a
Wow.
bunch of friends, and we bonded. So again, I wait a couple of months, and next thing I know, Scott Franklin, the money guy, the executive producer, calls and he says, "Evan, I'd like you to be the associate producer." And the reason I'm explaining all this, people get
Mm,
confused with the titles. I was basically the wrestling guy. I brought in
right.
Mickey's stunt double. I brought in the ring. I brought in
Yeah.
his trainer. I did 5 or 6 casting calls with all the wrestlers. I brought in
Mm.
Ron Killings, Romeo Roselli, Necro Butcher, etc., so on. And it was one of the great experiences of my life. And
And
um, and
for
and
those of you who may not have been clear enough, I was really, I didn't want to give the game away at the top of the program. We are talking about the Mickey Rourke movie, Mickey Rourke starring movie, The Wrestler. I mean,
yeah,
everyone knows it. Even wrestling fans don't, they know that film. So
yeah.
this is pretty. major. I couldn't. This is one of the reasons why when you popped up for me to be able to even message. I was like, I know this movie. I have this movie. I was going to have it here, and I
Yeah.
forgot to pick it up. I've got it here. It was one of my favorite. I love wrestling movies, and that was going to be one of my questions. Actually, is what differentiated your role, and did your wrestling background, play a part in what you were
Oh
doing?
yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
fully.
I was the wrestling guy to the point where I was reading, not writing. I
Mm,
don't want to take credit for something I didn't do. I
mm,
was reading every script, and in the initial script, there's a scene where Randy the Ram blades himself, and everybody, all the wrestlers are watching. And I said, nobody would watch. It's just another day at the office. Nobody would
yeah,
care whatsoever. I,
yeah.
I said that wouldn't ring true, and they took it out. And then
Ah,
the opposite, I took them basically 6 months. I was on the road every weekend with Darren and his crew because Darren wanted the film to ring true. He wanted to do his
mm,
research. So I took him to this convention in New Jersey, and it was basically, as far as the guest list, the WWE Hall of Fame, it was the Samoans, Johnny Valiant, Iron Sheik, Nikolai, Moolah, Mae Young,
wow.
Albano, Tony Atlas. I may be forgetting one or two. It's almost 20 years ago.
Yeah,
But the punchline was nobody was there. It was so empty. Iron Sheik's head was down on the table asleep. It was
right.
grim. There were more wrestlers and vendors than fans. And
Wow.
Aronofsky, who's a good guy, I'm not just saying it because I worked with him. His mom's a school teacher. He was a regular guy, just talented and driven. He wasn't some nepo baby like
No.
Stephanie or Stephanie McMahon or whatnot.
Yeah.
So Darren kept going, Evan, where is everybody? Where is everybody? And he felt sincerely upset. And
Yeah.
next thing I know, Rob Siegel wrote that scene into the movie. It wasn't in the original script.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, it was quite a ride, and some of it was almost like guerrilla filmmaking. We wanted 18 million, and we couldn't raise it on Mickey's name at the time because his star had kind of waned, and
Yeah.
doing like direct to video action flicks. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we raised $6 million. So most of those, not all, but most of those scenes, those were real wrestling fans who didn't want us there. We were
Right.
interrupting their shows.
No way.
Yeah, Ring of Honor, Jersey All Pro. So
Looking
at
back
one
on it now, I mean, they're probably really proud that they were actually part of
Oh
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're proud they were in it because
Yeah.
a lot of those guys were real wrestling fans.
Yeah.
So at one show, at one Ring of Honor show, they were particularly like hostile, like you guys are interrupting the flow of the show. So
Oh no.
Aronofsky gets in the ring like Mickey did at the end, and he's like, guys, we're gonna do you proud. We're gonna make a quality film. Just give us one or two more quick takes, you
Yeah.
know? And yeah, it was really
It's
magic, the
very
whole
cool.
thing. And $6 million we ended up. I was at the funding meetings, and
Right.
it was tough getting money for it. And that would
It's
be like the food budget on the Avengers or Captain America today, you know? Yeah.
and it's credited as the film that kind of relaunched Mickey Rourke's career, pretty
Yeah,
much
yeah, yeah.
at that point.
And none of us got rich from it, but Mickey's real payoff was when he played the heel in Iron Man because he was hot again, Iron Man
Yeah.
2, and he got
Yeah.
$1 million for that. That was a lot more than he made on The Wrestler.
There you go.
So,
It's obviously I liked seeing, you can say what you like about these big names, they do it out of desperation or just to work or whatever. But there are some of them out there that genuinely want to be part of these smaller projects to begin with, and obviously turned into quite a big project, but one of the lesser known ones because they believe in the story. Was there an element of that with him, do you think? Did he believe, but did he have an interest in wrestling at the time to kind of
he
live that?
was not really a wrestling person. He was a boxer.
He was.
At the height of his fame, 80s, hit movies, sex
Mm,
symbol, top box office. He went into boxing getting
yeah.
punched in the face. This is not a
Hence
normal career trajectory. You
Not
know,
really, unless you're good at it. You
these
know.
guys are like GQ with the creams protect. They don't want a wrinkle on them. This guy's getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's more the tortured artist type and a
Mm,
legit actor. I
mm,
mean, that performance. We were at the New York Film Festival, Lincoln Center, 2,300 people sold out, $40 a ticket. And I'm sitting there with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I, the scene where he goes, I'm just a broken down piece of meat when he's talking
mm,
to his daughter.
yeah.
I look around me and everybody's crying. And it was the first time I had seen the film. I didn't edit the film, you
Yeah.
know. I and I'm sitting there and I'm like, wow, this works.
Mm,
Because we had spent 7 years off and on doing this. From the time they called me to the time it was finished, that was 7 years. This is
wow.
what people don't realize when you actually do a quality film. We're
Yeah.
not pumping out stuff every couple of weeks like WWE. You know.
There's
Yeah.
quality writing involved in this, but we won't go down that route. That's that's it's. I understand. I haven't had the chance to watch the film back since I found this out. You shared a scene with Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what happened.
Yeah, go on.
I'm on set, and that's again, that's that sad autograph scene. And the first thing that happened that day was it looked very antiseptic. I said to Darren, I said it wouldn't look like this. There would be stuff scattered over every inch of the table. I knew as an agent because
Mm,
you have these little tables and you're trying to sell all your gimmicks. And
yeah.
I said it would be much more messy, much more cluttered. So there I am doing set design. So then I'm just standing there watching. They're setting up the cameras and setting up everything. And Darren gets this smirk. He goes, Evan, come here. And I go, yeah. And he goes, I want you to walk up to Mickey last, ask him for an autograph and a Polaroid. All of a
Mm.
sudden, I'm an actor. Not one stitch of makeup in my street clothes. This was all like Darren just got a light bulb and he
Yeah,
rolled
went
with
with
it.
it.
So Mickey comes over to me, whispers in my ear, just improv it. He thinks I'm an actor. I'm
Oh
not an
God.
actor. Okay. I've never even acted in high school, nothing. So
Mm,
there's probably 125 people there. There's giant cameras are in my face. So I'm walking past the other actors. The only wrestlers that were there was Manny Yarborough, who was an 800-pound sumo. He was a friend of mine, black sumo.
okay.
He
Wow.
fought at early UFC. Lovely guy. He's
Okay.
gone now. And Johnny Valiant. And Johnny Valiant was doing what the Iron Sheik was doing. Darren said, put your head on the table, go to sleep, because it'll look more pitiful, like the convention we were at. So I'm walking. I start talking to Manny a little, because Darren said, talk to these guys, walk up to Mickey last. And the whole time I'm thinking, what am I going to say to this guy?
Yeah.
Because we're improving it. So I go, what would I say to any legendary wrestler? And I said, quote, I loved you as a kid. I saw you at Madison Square Garden. Can I have your autograph?
Mm.
And he looks at me and he's improving and he goes, what's your name? So now I'm thinking, and I just
What is my name?
instinctively go, Evan. So how surreal this is. I'm playing myself in a fictional movie. How utterly
That's
surreal
amazing.
this is.
That's amazing.
And then, of course, I didn't know if I made the cut, but it did. And, a
That is
friend of
brilliant.
mine said to me, he said, Evan, he said, that was Darren's gift to you. Because again, none of us got rich from this. I mean, we
No.
all got paid, but none of us got rich from it.
Mm,
And he's like, this little, cameo you did will be
mm.
there forever. And
Nice.
I say Mickey's performance is so iconic. He won the Golden Globe, best actor in the
Mm,
world,
yeah.
and he lost at the Oscars to Sean Penn for Milk.
Mm,
So, which is nothing to be ashamed of. Sean Penn,
right.
tremendous actor. And and I don't know how far back you go with movies, but I compare that scene where he goes, I'm just a broken down piece of meat with Marlon Brando and On the Waterfront when Brando goes, I could have been a contender. It's just so
Oh,
tragic
yeah. Yeah.
And people 100 years from now, 200 years from now, will watch that film and
Mm.
cry.
Yeah.
There I'll be. And that means a lot to me. It really does. And the fact that it's such a quality film
Mm.
from the heart and a
Yeah.
tremendous, tremendous lead performance. And all the performances were great. Marissa Tomei was great, and Evan Rachel Wood was.
Quite a cast to it. And this is the thing, it could very easily have been a bit of a parody piece, a really expose, let's take the Mickey out of wrestling kind of thing. But this got endorsed by a lot of people in the industry. They actually found it.
Roddy Piper loved it.
Yeah.
Jim Cornette did not, and I'm a huge Cornette and Midnight Express fan.
Yeah. He doesn't like a lot though.
Jim Cornette said, "We don't all end up in trailer parks," and
Fine.
understood.
But this one
But
did.
yeah, but that's not the story we were telling. We were
No.
telling the story about one of many guys who did not end up well.
Yeah.
Nikolai was my buddy. He had a farm. He saved every dollar. Bret Hart, we've worked with on other projects, 350 days. And
Hmm.
Bret Hart has plenty of money. They didn't all end up destitute,
Yeah.
but plenty of guys ended up with nothing, bounces at a strip club or a rock club or
Hmm.
whatnot. And we told that story.
Yeah.
One wrestler who did not end well. And there's been plenty, so it's not like, we were pulling it out of left field. I mean, this
No.
doesn't happen, unfortunately.
No. And you touched there on there's another one of your works that I absolutely loved, which we will delve into just a little bit here. 350 Days was that I stumbled across it probably within the last couple of years. I was on Amazon Prime and I was finding whatever wrestling I could. I think it was the Sheik documentary that set me off, and I was like got really
It's
really back
funny. It's
into
funny.
watching stuff.
Mark Nowakowski, who did the Sheik documentary, today's his birthday by sheer
Oh,
coincidence.
okay.
Yeah, he's a good filmmaker, legitimate filmmaker.
Yeah, and that kind of set me off on this trail of I want to find more, and that's where I found 350 Days. And I'll let you say a bit more about what it is for anyone who doesn't know it. But I just got to say, I absolutely love that.
Thank
As
you so much. What happened was another Darren came into my life, Darren Antola, the executive producer of 350 Days, and he's pitching me to do a similar role as what I did for The Wrestler, to get them all kinds of wrestling related things
mm,
that they needed for the film, from photographs to videos, etc., so on, to do publicity. And initially, I was resistant because I just said to myself, nothing is going to top The Wrestler. Nothing.
mm,
I don't think anything has since then, and it came out in
no,
2008. But to make a long story short, I met with him and was sitting in a diner, and he's a blue collar guy. He's not some Hollywood shark. And he starts talking. He's from your era. He's like, "Oh my God, I love Mr. Wonderful and
okay,
Superfly and Morocco and
yeah,
Piper." And I'm agreeing with everything. I'm like, we're on the same page.
yeah,
These are the guys I loved back then.
hmm,
And I uh I just liked the guy, and I could
hmm,
see it was from the heart, and he wasn't like a big money guy. He was passionate about it, um and I agreed to do it, and I'm really glad I did, because what happened was we met with an editor named Michael Burlingame, who worked with, get this, Paul McCartney,
wow,
Mariah Carey, and Sting. Not
wow,
not WCW
no,
Sting,
no, no, the
Sting
other
from the
one.
Police. Okay. And I said,
Brilliant.
I said to I said to Darren, I said, this is the guy. He's not a wrestling guy. He's not gonna know the main event is from the
No,
prelim guys. He's gonna pick out the best material, the most moving material. He's a real pro. He's not an obsessed wrestling guy.
that's a
So
good point.
so I said to Mike, Mike, make a movie, edit a movie. We had 90 hours of footage with all these legends, 3 dozen legends, which was whittled down to an hour 50, which is a
Yeah.
massive undertaking. This took 6 years. 6 years.
Wow.
So half these guys are dead at this point. That's
Yeah.
how long ago some of these interviews were. So I said, make an 80-year-old woman who never watched wrestling cry. I said, that's the movie. I said, we don't need another movie. The guy's got 1,000 action figures in his man
No.
cave. We don't need another movie where the journalist goes down to the wrestling school and they put him in an arm bar. This has all been done a million times.
Yeah.
I said, make a movie that they pour their hearts out. And that's exactly what these guys did. It was like they were in therapy. They were
Yeah.
on the road 350 days, the NWA champions. They didn't see their kids grow up. They weren't there for their kid's wedding. They weren't there for their kid's birth as the
Mm.
wife was having them. The sacrifices, the physical, emotional toll on these guys. I said,
Yeah.
that's the story.
Yeah.
And these guys poured their hearts out. We listed superstar Billy Graham and Bret Hart as the quote unquote stars, but
Mm.
oh my God, we had Tito and Greg Valentine and the Wolfman of all people, Larry Sharp, Ox Baker, Abdullah the Butcher,
Some
Mr.
fantastic
Wonderful.
characters in
I
there.
mean, I don't want to bore you with a laundry list of
No.
3 dozen names, but it was really an amazing group of people that we
Mm.
accumulated,
It was
and
great because all I remember, not all I remember, what I remember as I was watching it is I was almost thinking who is going to be on next because I was kind of thinking it was going to be quite a small amount of guys that you followed around for the whole thing, which would have been great. But then all of a sudden, yeah, Ox Baker. For one, I wasn't familiar necessarily with a lot of Ox Baker, but he's the one that really stuck in my head because he's a character and a half.
a lot of people said Ox Baker stole the movie because
Yeah, right.
he
There we
was
go.
so colorful and
Yeah,
charismatic. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And it was for me. I'm a wrestling history nerd, and I guess that's why I'm quite disconnected from it these days, is because I've got my era that I'm very, very proud of, that I'm very close to, and I like going back beyond that to find out anything else that I don't know. So films like this for me are really, you're bringing the heroes that I grew up watching and you're showing them raw. You're showing the real story behind what we grew up watching.
Yeah,
Um,
and the sacrifices, all of these guys should have had pensions,
mm,
401ks, health benefits. A lot of them did not end well, and it's a disgrace that so we didn't pull that number out of nowhere. Bret Hart said to us when he was WWF champ, he wrestled 330 days a year. Greg Valentine, when he was Intercontinental champ, said he wrestled 320 days a year. So these guys, some wrestlers will say to me, Evan, I'm always in pain.
yeah,
Always in pain. I mean, I saw many of my heroes in wheelchairs at the end, Lou
mm,
Albano, Iron Sheik, Abdullah the Butcher. You saw
mm,
Lex Luger right there in the Hall
yeah,
of Fame the other day.
yeah,
Lex Luger's in 350 days. So is
yeah,
Abdullah the Butcher. So my point being, these guys need to be taken care of.
yeah,
Triple H will come out at the press scrum after another record-breaking gate boasting about how much money they made and how much tickets they sold. And
yeah,
meanwhile, Billy Graham and Bushwhacker Butch and Virgil, all these guys died needing GoFundMes.
yeah,
Help these guys.
yeah,
Make a fund, take 1/2 of 1% of your massive profits
exactly.
and help. The NFL has a fund at this point. I mean, they had to do it kicking and screaming before it happened, but eventually they did it.
Yeah.
So, you
And
know,
these are the guys that, for me, they're the reason wrestling is still relevant and probably as big as it is. You can't credit all of them with that, but they're the ones that, for me, put wrestling on the map. They're the ones that hooked people in. They sacrificed so much, and they get acknowledged as legends, and they get given these deals, these appearances, which is brilliant. But we all kind of think, okay, they've obviously made loads of money from this because of what they were doing. It's got to be worth it. And I think what 350 days did is make us see, actually, no, some of this hasn't been worth it. It can't be because of, what they kind of left with in the end.
they
And
get a minuscule, percentage
mm,
of gimmicks that they sell, and
yeah,
the thing that bothers me is the so-called smart fans who are 500 wrestling books and 5,000 shoot interviews in. They have no idea because they'll make idiotic comments like they all pissed away fortunes of money on wine, women, and song. And these guys were my friends. And
Mm,
Johnny Valiant said to me, Evan, I never broke 100 grand in wrestling. And
really?
that's 300 plus days on the road
Yeah.
where you're in hotels every night and sending money back home and
Mm.
gas and tolls and 3 meals a day and
You're paying to wrestle essentially.
so even mid 80s, when the bigger money came in, the Hulkamania era, these
Mm,
guys were making, let's say, 400 grand a year, some of them told me.
mm,
Okay, which sounds like a lot of money to the average person. It
mm,
is, but do the math. If you're wrestling 320 days for $400,000, okay, Mick Jagger or James Brown or whoever is headlining those same arenas, they weren't working for that. They were
yeah.
making a lot more than these guys,
Yeah.
headlining, and so
And putting
something
their
isn't
bodies
right.
through a lot less as well, I would say.
Yeah, and something's not right with the math there.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, these guys did not make what they should have,
Mm,
and you know, that look, a lot of them had day jobs after they retired. So what does
yeah.
that tell you? They
Well,
didn't leave with millions. Today, the big stars are making big money. It's a
yeah.
different game, but
They're being maybe I'm speaking out of turn because I don't know everything. I try to distance myself a little bit from it these days, but it seems to me they are being well looked after. You get guys at the top. Let's say, yes, fair enough, he's paid his dues. John Cena, again, he's a part-time champion. They put the belt on someone who is around for. He's even going around saying how many appearances he's got this
yeah.
year and flaunting that. It's like, okay, great. We've just seen Roman Reigns had the same thing. We've seen Brock Lesnar do the same thing. It's like, fine, you may be learning from your history here by you're looking after your top guys, but really you might just be taking the mick now compared to what these guys put themselves through. I don't know, just my
Oh,
opinion. But
absolutely. I mean, I'm watching that Hall of Fame, and Ivan Koloff would be on my Mount Rushmore of great foreign heels. He
mm,
gets a 90-second tribute, and then they do a
yeah,
90-minute fawning tribute to Triple H, including a statue. A
I didn't
statue.
see. Oh, actually, was that okay? I saw that god awful thing afterwards. Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
this isn't Martin Luther King. This guy's a wrestling guy.
Yeah, he's been
So
given Employee of the Month award. That's essentially what it is. He's got a massive pat on his back from his own peers. Um, the
I
guys
I mean.
they work for it. Yeah.
Ivan Koloff deserved a lot more, and Triple H. Honestly, as somebody who attended NWA shows mid to late 80s live,
Mm,
mostly in Philadelphia, but also in New York, New Jersey,
mhm.
um, I don't think there's been a single WrestleMania that touched a regular monthly NWA house show. I
No.
mean, you would go to these house shows, Flares on Top, The Horsemen, The Road Warriors, Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, The Russians with Ivan Koloff.
Mm,
Mid-card were guys who headlined in WWF. Rick
yeah.
Rude, Billy Graham, Jimmy Valiant. It was
Mm,
so talent laden. These were
mm.
the greatest shows I ever saw in 50 plus years of attending. Like I said, my first card was 74. We're in 2025.
Yeah, right.
So nothing touched those NWA shows. And somehow, there's this awe and wonder for Triple H. I watched 2 nights of WrestleMania. They were both uneven. There were
Mm.
less than a handful of really good matches. It
Yeah,
was
I
more
don't even get that
entrances
many.
and sing-alongs than actual wrestling.
And this is, and this is where I get times have moved on. When I was growing up, there was a hell of a lot more wrestling than storylines. I used to like the bits in between, the bits that told the stories and the video packages and everything. I struggle now because I watched the John Cena promo from Monday Night Raw, but immediately I could see it's 16 minutes long. I'm like, at what point did it become okay to have a 16-minute promo in the middle of a ring? Is yeah, because this show is like 3 hours long. But I don't know, the wrestling has gone now. It is more of the work going into the storylines, the storytelling side of it.
Well, it's
Um,
all about the storylines, the entrances, the
yeah,
sing-alongs, the catchphrases, the
yeah,
merchandise,
it's
and but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
no,
Where the, I mean, on a 2.5, 3 hour Raw, there's 30 or 40 minutes of actual in-ring wrestling, and
exactly,
even that's interrupted with commercials.
yeah,
So
I know,
it's not for me. I basically just watch the pay-per-views at this point.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I'll watch. I still enjoy wrestling. I don't want to sound like one of these guys who stopped. Some of the old timers are like, "There's been no good wrestling since the territories." That's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense.
yeah, yeah,
You're British. I tell people all the time, some of the greatest matches I ever saw was Nigel McGuinness and Bryan Danielson for Ring of
okay,
Honor. I
yeah,
said that
yeah,
was Flash Steamboat. That was Dory Funk Jack Briscoe. That
mm,
was the same level of great, great wrestling. And today, ironically, my favorite active wrestler is Osprey. I love Osprey.
okay.
So the guys go, oh, he's just a spot monkey. I mean, you can't even be watching it if you say that. The
No, see,
guy's incredible.
he is. So I have a bit of a distaste with today's product, as we call it, for a lot of these matches, which are just spot after spot after spot. And Will Ospreay, maybe I've tied him with the same brush because the matches I've seen like that, he's been involved in, but he's not made a name for himself like he has doing just that. There's
Oh,
got to
he
be
could
substance
wrestle.
to it.
He
Yeah,
could wrestle. It's not, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And being British, obviously, I'm going to be biased. There is going to be even a guy like that. There's going to be class in there because let's be honest,
I
he's
mean,
British.
I love Kenny Omega and Will
Mm.
Ospreay, the Luchadors. I'm not like trapped in 1984,
No,
but but I do not like when on a 4 hour WrestleMania, more than 2 hours of it is the entrances and the other stuff and not the
absolutely.
wrestling. There's less wrestling than
Yeah,
anything on a wrestling show. And then, oh, it's not wrestling, it's sports entertainment. Well, in that case, make it entertaining. You know?
quite exactly. Yeah, don't get me started with that. It's
I mean, Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley and Sky, that was an
yeah,
excellent match. I appreciated
it was
that.
good, and I think the quality. I'm not saying that the women are completely upstaging the men here, but there has been a real transition in women's wrestling from back when I was watching it through to today. I mean that is a product which has got very very strong, and I think yes they've noticed that and they put a lot of effort into making it what it is.
Charlotte Flair's great.
Mm.
Ripley's excellent.
Oh,
Belair's excellent. I
mm.
mean, the Japanese women wrestlers are always great, like
They've always
almost
been good. Jumping
normally.
Bomb
So,
Angels, I remember watching when I was growing up.
yeah,
They
I saw them live. They were great.
is it, yeah. I'm going to bring up something that I've only just seen today, actually, and I think it kind of fits with some of the stuff that you've done and what we've been talking about.
Sure.
But I just want to get your take on. There's a new documentary kind of series. I don't know what it is. It's coming out on Netflix, where it really is like a real behind the scenes. A lot of people call it an expose of WWE, where they're doing this whole kind of like they've done with F1 with Drive to Survive and all that. Um, a series like that, which completely just exposes everything that goes on behind wrestling. Do you think that is? Have we got to a point where we're free to acknowledge that and it fits where we are with wrestling now, or do you think it's a really bad idea?
It doesn't bother me whatsoever. What bothers me is that the ironically named creative isn't particularly creative. They have the same guys going back 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah,
I mean, do you really want to go to a wildly overpriced pay-per-view to see Randy Orton and John Cena again? I mean, they wrestled
quite,
250 times already,
quite,
and now they're only older and slower.
and
So,
quite. Yeah,
I mean, so if you're creative and you quote unquote future endeavor
mm,
all these great young wrestlers and can't make stars out of them, isn't it their job to, they have the tools, obviously,
yeah.
they have the look. I mean, why can't you? I'll give you an example. So in AEW, two of the biggest stars is Swerve Strickland and Tony Storm.
Hmm.
How did WWE let them slip through their
Quite.
hands?
Yeah,
As great as they both are.
yeah.
So, you're doing that safe, vanilla, same five moves WWE style most of the time.
Mm,
And if it's you're supposed to be packaging them and making them into stars, and God forbid you actually just let them wrestle.
Quite.
Like Chad Gable, they're having this silly gimmick.
Yeah.
Why can't you just have one match in 3 hours where two guys come out and have a great wrestling match?
Yeah. He's
Let
got to
let
do
guys
that.
like Chad Gable or Finn Balor do that. Every
Mm.
time I see Finn Balor, there's 37 guys in the ring,
Yeah.
doing a run in. I mean,
Quite, and that is it. There's no decisive victories anymore. I mean, let's we won't. I won't spend the whole time talking about John Cena's return and things like that. But that to me was the weakest WrestleMania main event I think I've ever seen, and the ending
um,
to it.
it was pretty lame. I
Yeah.
remember Miz defended the title. That wasn't exactly
No, I
great.
mean I don't think he was ready for a main event, a WrestleMania main event necessarily. I mean they weren't meant. They almost didn't take his title run that seriously. I was really surprised when he was in that spot. But they
But
just seem to be forcing everything. Like, okay, this is Cena's last year. We're going to have him get the title. We're going to have him go against Randy Orton, probably CM Punk. Let's get all these old matches, have a rerun. At the detriment of who? Who have they got on their roster who's not getting that shot?
well,
Yeah,
so Cody has to take a back seat until he probably will win it back at some
that's
pay-per-view
what I
down the
think.
road,
Yeah,
maybe the next WrestleMania. I don't know.
maybe. I think he'll be the one, the last. He'll be the last match, I think, in John Cena's tour, and he'll get it back then. And it's too predictable. But you know,
I saw Cena headline Madison Square Garden 3 times, and I only casually go to WWF. Um, he had a really vanilla cage match with Dolph Ziggler, where there was no blood and you didn't even know why they were in a cage, why they were shooting. It was just kind of like there. It was
yeah,
okay, but nothing special. But I saw him in two great matches. I saw him against Bray Wyatt, headline the Garden, and he put over Bray Wyatt. And I saw him against
yeah.
Roman Reigns, and he put over Roman Reigns. So
Okay.
the myth that Cena never puts anybody over is just not true. Two out of the
Mm,
3 matches I saw him and he lost clean in the middle of the ring.
yeah.
And and the guy at least was, a
Yeah.
top-notch wrestler. They all have like the same five move syndrome in WWE.
Yeah.
They have to get in there, special.
Yeah. But nobody's got a finisher anymore. Not that it is effective. I mean, back in
Yeah.
the day, I take Jake Roberts' DDT. He hit that. No one's getting up from that. It was
Stan
Baron David.
Stasiak used to do the heart
That's
punch.
it. Yeah, exactly. It's fairly simple moves, but they were done right. That you knew as soon as they were hit. But these days, I mean, a DDT's just become a throwaway thing anyway.
Well, they'll do devastating stuff off the top rope, and the guy will still kick out.
Exactly. Yeah. So where do you go from that? You can't set up a believable finisher when you're just having them kick out of everything and doing each other's finishing moves about 3 times.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And then they'll do like a UFC move. They'll put him in an armbar, and the guy
yeah,
quits. After 400
yeah,
high.
that's it. And he taps out to that. I can't believe Jey Uso won the world title over Gunther with the sleeper.
I don't think Jey Uso's anything special either. He-
It,
Triple H actually said it. He goes, Jey Uso gets a great reaction and he sells a lot of merchandise, and
there
that's what they're judging it
you
on.
go.
I have never once seen him in a great singles match. Not
No,
once.
no, I haven't seen a lot of him, but I think it's a shame when you have the Royal Rumble, which is supposedly the match which makes the WrestleMania main event, and then the guy that wins it wins the world title on the opening match.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit backwards, but anyway.
You know what else is backwards? The second night when they had the three women and they put on the best match first, the opening match.
Yeah,
So the rest of the show feels flat in comparison. And then when the main event is a big disappointment, it's all ass backwards. Because when
yeah,
I was a kid, it built towards the main event.
yeah. They also the opening match. I think I've heard from a couple of some of the guys who were in the industry in that at this time. They saw the opening match not as a punishment, but it's almost like a challenge because it's like you put on a killer opening match, you've set the tone for the show then, and that can only make everyone else perform better because they want to perform better than the match before. Um, some guys saw it as a real insult, which there was a time when they put out really lame ones at the beginning. I get that.
When you had CM Punk and McIntyre in the cage a couple of months ago, that was by far the best match on the card, and so was the women's match on night two of WrestleMania the other
Mhm.
night.
Yeah,
So if nothing can touch it afterwards, basically you're sitting there 4 hours later. It's like
yeah,
nostalgia already,
yeah,
It's
quite. It's too long as well. Anyway, I could drone on and on about things that are wrong with it. Winding it back to your work, obviously the reason that you're here. Um, so your writing work was something I wanted to delve into as well, because as a writer myself, I'm always really keen. I pick other writers' brains and how your inspirations come to you and things like that. Just talk a little bit about your writing experience, because I believe you write. Is it you editor for Pro Wrestling Stories? Have I got that right?
Yeah, I'm the senior editor at ProWrestlingStories.com. And like I said, I've been writing about wrestling since the 70s, in the early primitive sheets that were Xerox. They would like steal them in offices on office copy machines. This is pre-internet, man.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so we had COVID here in New York, and we were devastated. I live in Queens, New York, near Kennedy and LaGuardia airports, and we uh, we had 800 people a day dying in New York. It was devastating. I had 5 friends die of COVID.
Oh,
So
Jesus.
so I go. I was teaching at the time, and my principal calls and he's like, we're shutting down because of COVID. Then I go to the gym and we're shutting down. And then I go to the diner that I always ate in and I can't make it on takeout. We're closing permanently, not just shutting
Wow.
down, closing permanently,
Wow.
etc. So on. And I felt like a prisoner with an ankle bracelet. And
Yeah, right.
it was a terrible, terrible 2.5, 3 years. And to keep my sanity, I just wrote every day. Like you couldn't go to the gym, it was shut down,
Mm,
So I would wake up every morning and write. And I had all these stories, experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly of your entire life
mm,
floating around in my head. And I wrote 100+ stories. The
wow.
book is called Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets, about juggling careers in film and teaching and wrestling, and
It's three very, very demanding careers for just
well,
one
even
of those
even when we
individuals.
did the wrestler, Aronofsky says, Evan, we're going to be shooting 7 5-day weeks. I'm like, Darren, I can't take off 35 days from my teaching job. So there was always this like tightrope.
Yeah,
And his mother was a school teacher, so he totally understood. He says, Evan, just be with us every weekend and be within a phone's reach when we need you. I said, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Nope. So, he really understood because
mm,
you would have lost your pension and everything else. I
yeah,
mean, so anyway, I start writing this book, and some of it are friends that I've lost along the way, like Johnny Valiant, like Nikolai Volkoff, Killer
mm,
Kowalski. These were friends. And
mm,
but instead of doing the old, they held this title in this territory
yeah,
and this angle, it was none of that. It was them as human beings. Who were these people? And like 350 days, we wanted to do
yeah.
something that went beyond. And so I'm telling all these stories. Gordon Scazzeri, the AWF promoter who burned through 2 inheritances. I was at his memorial. He was a close friend.
Right.
And he died in a welfare hotel. He burned through 2 inheritances promoting wrestling.
Wow.
He was originally from England, Gordon
Oh,
Scazzeri.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool, cool.
And we so I just some of this was just bothering me
Mm,
all these years, and other stories are quite funny, road stories, because you don't want to make a whole book, about death. And
no, no.
so one story, I'm on a shuttle bus with Nikolai Volkoff and the Iron Sheik. We just did the Hollywood Collectors Show autograph signing, and a bunch of other guys, Greg Valentine and such. So we're on this shuttle bus going from the hotel to the airport. This woman is looking Nikolai up and down, and all of a sudden she goes, "You're Nikolai Volkoff." And he was the warmest, friendliest guy.
Yeah.
Um, yes, it's very nice to meet you. And they start chatting, and she was like, "Oh, I saw you as a kid with my family." And so, he was just a lovely guy, Nikolai. And he goes, "I'd like to introduce you to my partner, the Sheik." So the Sheik is like half asleep, unshaven. He looked like something the cat dragged in. And she's looking him up and down, and she says the absolute worst thing you could possibly say. She goes, "You're not the Iron Sheik." This is 20
Boom.
years past his prime, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so he flips out on her on this shuttle bus packed with people,
Right.
and he goes, "You stupid jabroni, get away from me!" And at the top of his lungs, he's bellowing, and she's fleeing in terror on this packed moving bus. So there's some funny
Oh,
stuff in
that's
there
great.
also. I mean, 9/11, 2003, not 2001, 2 years
Okay.
to the day. And that also hit New York hard,
Yeah.
9/11, believe me. I'm on a little puddle jumper 20-seater plane. We're about to board with Johnny Valiant from Philly to New York. We had just done a signing. I was an agent. So
Mm.
we look at the pilot. He looks like Lee Van Cleef from the Spaghetti Westerns. The guy looked rough. He
Right.
looked rough. This guy wasn't like GQ like these pilots. He looked
No.
like a bad guy in a movie. He looked like the guys like Chuck Norris, the terrorist Chuck Norris would kill like in an 80s action flick.
Right. Okay.
So Johnny's looking at me and I'm looking at Johnny. He's like, "Did you see this guy?" I'm like, "Yeah." So now we're debating, do we actually get on the plane?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
9/11 is fresh on our minds. This is 2 years
Yeah.
to the day. So we get on the plane, and because it was a 20-seater, every bit of turbulence, the plane was like rattling.
Mm.
And we're like, "Are we going down? Are we going down into the ocean here?" So I'm like, "Johnny, you might have to pile drive this pilot. I don't know if we're going to make it." Obviously, we did. I'm talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a lot of funny stuff in there
That's very
too.
cool.
I love these guys, man. Johnny used to sleep on my couch, and Greg Valentine slept on my couch, and
Wow.
Lanny Poffo, man, that was heartbreaking because he was very health conscious. He was not a partier, you know.
Right.
Lanny was 69 when he died, and this guy would not put anything unhealthy in his body, didn't
Yeah.
smoke, nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
but I tell people, again, going back to the sacrifices these guys made, they wrestled in smoke-filled arenas.
Mm.
Okay. Some of them used steroids back in the day, not all of them, but Lanny admitted to it briefly when he was on top with Hogan.
Mm.
Uh, they were in a different time zone every night. They were traveling every day. It's just not a healthy, it's not a
No.
lifestyle that leads to longevity for the most part. You don't
No.
hear about a lot of legends living into their 90s. It's very rare.
No.
Very
No.
rare. 80s is pretty rare even.
Yeah.
And so
Never
when
thought of that.
yeah, when Nikolai and Lanny passed relatively young, considering they were both very health conscious,
Yeah.
it was heartbreaking.
Doesn't count, does
Nikolai
it?
called me from his hospital bed a few days before he died. He said, "Evan, they cleared out an infection. I'm going home. I feel much better." His wife
Mm.
found him dead in bed. Yeah.
Just I know. You just don't. I mean, it's a blessing in a way that you got to spend time with these guys that you're able to pass these stories on.
My final piece in the book, I say exactly that. That's the exact
Really.
words I used.
Oh,
Blessing. And I'm not religious. I'm just,
no.
these guys, when my mother died, Lanny and Nikolai and Jimmy Valiant and Johnny Valiant, they all called. And these
Mm.
are like, heroes, not just
Yeah.
friends. And it's a boost. It's a boost
Yeah.
when you're
It
at your
is.
lowest.
Yeah.
So again, in the book, I present them as people. It's not stats and minutia,
Yeah.
and a Wikipedia like 87
We
titles listed. I'm not
we
interested.
can all get that, and I think for me, and there's plenty of me around, guys like me who just love to get to know what we can of these guys, and it's these kind of stories, as writers like yourself, that help to provide those. So
I'll tell you a story. This is not in the book, but when Tiger Khan died, he was a dear friend. I mean, very close. And I'm telling a mutual friend over the phone that Tiger died, and I overhear his wife say to him, "Don't tell me you're getting upset about some wrestler dying. Like they're less than human
yeah,
because
because of
they're
what they do.
portrayed cartoonishly many times on TV.
Yeah,
And these are people with families. And
yeah,
when I see overzealous fans talking, they should fire that guy. No, that guy has a wife and
mm,
children, and
yeah,
they don't understand. They're so consumed with all of it that these are
yeah,
flesh and blood human beings who sacrificed mightily for your entertainment.
yeah,
And even the other day, Drew McIntyre did an interview. I like McIntyre. He's a quality wrestler.
yeah. He's cool.
And
Yeah,
he's a serious wrestler. He's not a
mm,
cartoonish character.
no,
So McIntyre says, when they throw me in the air and I land on the mat, it hurts.
yeah.
It hurts,
Of course it does.
like because people don't seem to
It's
understand.
not sponge. They're I've been quite up close to a wrestling ring. Some of the even the indie shows over here that I go to, and it's raw. You really feel for these guys. It's not a trampoline.
I'll tell you what happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. This is unbelievable. I don't think I've said this on any show.
Mm,
I booked Tommy Rich for a bunch of appearances, former NWA champion.
yeah,
Lovely
yeah.
guy. Friendly, fan friendly, just a good-hearted guy.
Mm,
So I book him on an indie show in New Jersey, not to wrestle, just to sign autographs and
yeah,
cut a promo. He's sitting there. One of the wrestlers died in the ring. Died in ring.
yeah,
Vince Steele. I mean, I don't know if you heard about it that far away.
yeah. No, I
Yeah,
did. Yeah,
39 years old, father,
yeah.
father of 3 kids.
Mm,
And Tommy was practically in tears. I wasn't there. Jimmy
no,
Valiant was in town. I went to visit Jimmy Valiant because Jimmy's in his 80s. You don't know
yeah,
how much more time
yeah,
you have to hang out with somebody like him. So I went to see Jimmy, but meanwhile, I booked Tommy into this card, and he said, I never saw somebody die in a ring. And I've been
no.
in this business 50 years. So this is
Wow.
serious stuff. People don't
Yeah, it's
realize. People
yeah,
don't. I've done heel managing and I'm not trained. So I've worked indies. And one time this promoter didn't speak English. And he goes,
right.
Luchador? And I go, no, 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 no. So when we were the heels, and I just talk. I don't take bumps. I'm not
Yeah,
trained. So when the faces ran after us, I was really running because I wasn't 100% sure that the promoter gave them the message that I'm not
that
a
you were
wrestler.
right. Yeah.
You know, I'm fleeing for my life because I don't want these guys to put their hands on me. I'm not, I'm not that young anymore myself.
Right.
So yeah.
That's brilliant. Evan, I could sit here and talk to you. I mean, you joked at the start that you could talk for 3 hours, and I think we could easily do that. You've got.
I've enjoyed it too. I'll come back anytime you
Oh,
like.
that'd be brilliant. Yeah, because
Seriously,
I
seriously.
was gonna say, you're one of the guys who everything that you have done that we've touched on has, even down to the wrestler, it's a fictional film, but it brought us the real side of wrestling. Everything that you've done, you have helped to really bring these guys as humans to us who grew up and loved what they were doing in the ring. So thank you for
Mickey
everything.
Rourke spent a lot of time with Greg Valentine
Did
before
he?
filming.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So people always like, where did you get the character? It wasn't based on Greg Valentine, but some of the fanny pack and the hair, and
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you could see
You
some
can
Greg.
see it now.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can
yeah,
see it now.
yeah.
No, Evan, I'll give you just a a couple of minutes here at the end, just plug whatever that you can. Where can people find you if you've got social pages with your work, and
Oh,
then where can
thanks
they
so
find your
much.
book as well?
Sure. Wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets. If you look on the page, that's me with Mickey and with Nicolas Cage, because we almost had Nicolas Cage
Of
because
course, yes, I found that out today as well. Didn't realize that.
that's a story in there also, and that
That's
you can
cool.
pick that up on Amazon. And I tell 6 or 7 different stories about making the wrestler, and that's why wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets. It's about making the wrestler in 350 days, and some other films I've been involved with. We did a film called Wrestling Then and Now, a documentary with
I
Killer
watched that earlier today.
Kowalski.
Mm,
Homicide just retired.
yes,
That guy's great. That
yeah.
guy's underrated,
Mm.
tremendous. And you can find me on Facebook under Evan Ginzburg, right here, EvanGinzburg, and also Evan Ginzburg's Old School Wrestling Memories. And every day there's a bunch of old school stuff in there and historians talking about the old days. And sometimes I'll disappoint them by saying, I still like some of today's wrestling. Some of these guys don't, but
There's a debate there whenever you say that. So, Evan, thank you so much for your time. This has been an absolute blast. It's everything that I thought it was going to
my
be.
pleasure. Anytime, Chris. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much for your
much.
support. Really
No
appreciate it.
worries. Take care, mate.
You too.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Once Upon a Turnbuckle to keep updated about all future shows.